now Citrus County's top political podcast.
At some point you look around, and you're the only one.
It's pretty good.
And just like that, the perspective shifts.
Paging Bobby Winsler to the microphone. On in 3, 2.
Welcome in, coming to you from the Concurrent Media Network in the heart of Citrus County. However you're making this part of your day, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, or on the Concurrent website, we have the Android app launched. iPhone app should launch today. This show brought to you today by Vellum. As events are returning, make sure yours stands out with professional marketing for your big day. Vellum, the difference is in the design. Learn more at tampabayvellum.com. That's tampabayvellum.com. Hello to you. Happy belated Father's Day if it applies. It doesn't to me yet, unless you count the four-legged one. So thankful you landed here today. We have an okay show. I'm just kidding. We have a great show for you today. There are 2 commission meetings. There's a code compliance public workshop this morning, and then the board will kick off their regular meeting about an hour from now. Commissioner Holly Davis proposing that each commissioner has their own travel budget instead of sharing a single budget that requires approval from the rest of the board. Seems like a step back from transparency, but I'll reserve my judgment until after they discuss. This is all from a rundown that the Chronicle's Mike Wright provided, though the list did not include a discussion about extending the contract for road resurfacing company DAB, something that I wrote about in both columns last week, so I will be watching for that as well. Probably the biggest news of the week was a lawsuit filed against the county in which Chairman Scott Carnahan is not named as a defendant, but is accused of creating an environment of sexual harassment at the workplace. This is not going to be a full topic today, but I do want to say this since I used to work for him as a campaign manager in 2018. We had a lawsuit filed against us on that cycle that admittedly looked bad on the surface, but it was dismissed. And I have no idea the detail that goes into this one, so me, like many Facebook commenters, will continue to assume innocence until proven otherwise. What I do find interesting about this is that the Chronicle just wrote the story now. The lawsuit, if you look at the papers that were posted along with it, the lawsuit was filed on February 27th of this year. And someone must have given it to the paper before then, because inevitably someone always ends up sending this stuff to the media. So why now? Your guess is as good as mine. But this week also featured another story seemingly went after former Inverness City Manager Frank DiGiovanni with some weird accusations of things that weren't actually against city policy. And if you read the whole piece, it felt like the paper was just grasping at straws to paint someone who has long since left public life, paint him in a bad light. So again, we ask, why this? Frank is, in my opinion, the most recognizable name outside of Scott Carnahan, who lives in District 4. So humor me for a second as I put back on that tinfoil hat that I have only once before. Here is my second ever hot take. I think you see a candidate enter the District 4 County Commission race within the next week, and it's probably somebody who has ties to either the Chamber or the Chronicle, someone like a John Murphy. This hot take is far more of a stretch than my other hot take, which was the animal shelter is going to cost between $11 and $11.5 million, something we're going to talk about in topic 2. But that one sounded conspiratorial at the time, and yet is turning out to be more true each day. So I don't want to talk the Carnahan story, because I think the real story is not speculating over what little information we know about the lawsuit, but rather why the Chronicle would just now break a story about documents that they've presumably had for months. But maybe not. Maybe they've just now stumbled across them, and I am a conspiracy theorist. We are going to talk much more about that animal shelter and how one other Florida county is going through a worse time with their shelter planning right now than us. But I want to start with this. I attended the Crystal River charrette last night, charrette being a fancy word for a meeting in which stakeholders solve problems. Let me describe it to you like this. I teach a college class about an hour from now, all online over the summer, although we have been in person in the fall and spring semesters. And in order to engage the kids, since it is entirely virtual, I have them do a lot of group projects. Inevitably, there are going to be some kids that just have no interest in working for the grade. It doesn't make them bad people. It does make them a bad student. But they hope to coast by on the work of others. We all know this to be true. Because it's so common, most people in the group will come to expect it and not really care. But there will be one or two in the group who will speak out against this practice. Usually their outrage is quelled when they find out I grade each person separately based on results of a survey in which I ask them about the contributions they made personally and the efforts made by their group mates. But every now and then, knowing that their own grade is safe, isn't enough for someone that put forth that maximum effort. They want to know the freeloader is punished. I don't think this makes the achiever a bad person, just as I don't think the lack of effort makes the other student a bad person. I see it as a hypersensitive sense of justice. This relates to the charrette because that basically is a group project working together to develop a 50-year master plan for the city of Crystal River. And if last night is any indication, they are off to a great start. There were roughly 100 people in attendance, which the consultants said is usually the turnout of a city 8 to 9 times the size of Crystal River. I hope that's true. It feels like something that they would say anyway, but I personally was impressed with the turnout. In government, we can't afford to think of those who don't participate as freeloaders. Nobody should be required to have government in their life. There is also a responsibility, though, for those of us who are involved to not forget about those who aren't. The second election I ever worked, it was a Tampa City mayoral election in 2011, 10 years ago. And evaluating data from that effort, a striking voter trend is revealed. If you know anything about the geography of Tampa, there's a road that runs through the heart of the city, State Road 60, otherwise known as Kennedy Boulevard. Everything south toward MacDill Air Force Base is known as South Tampa. It's a wealthier part of the city, Bayshore Boulevard, places like that. Follow me here for a second as I break this down into fractions. In 2011, over half the votes came from just 1/4 of the precincts, and 2/3 of these precincts were south of Kennedy. Now, population density has some to do with this, but primarily it showed that South Tampa residents were the ones who decided elections. Over 50% of the votes coming from just 25% of the precincts, and 2/3 of these south of Kennedy. I had been volunteering at a precinct at the Marshall Center, which is a main building on the USF campus where I got my master's degree. And we were giving away free pizza to anyone who showed up to vote. Out of 1,477 people registered at that precinct, which is in North Tampa, we didn't even use an entire pizza. That type of lack of participation is a choice, but not one that should be punished by elected officials. Let's look at it this way, though. I doubt that will happen here because of the quality of the character of our elected officials in the Crystal River area. By coincidence, I happened to walk out of the meeting with Commissioner Jeff Carnahan, who I've been a little critical of lately. And he said he's been reading some of the stuff, but he was as open to conversation, as eager to hear outside information, as well as defend his own opinion as anyone would expect. Just incredibly amiable and willing to learn. I was the campaign manager for Mayor Joe Meek. Although we were unopposed, we planned events, we ran some ads, and it wasn't uncommon to find him working on message strategy memos well after midnight, according to the electronic track changes on our files. That's the type of work ethic he had back on the campaign trail, even unopposed, and that's what he brings to that office and to the direction of Crystal River. And this is striking to me for something that has never been that important to me, and that is how much someone cares. It's mattered to me, but it's never been a metric that I've weighted in the highest regard. To give you an example, remember that the Chronicle endorsed Chuck Kenneal in the sheriff primary in 2016, admitting that Mike Prendergast was more qualified, but the reasoning was that Chuck probably cared about Citrus County more. That's crazy town to me. If you can do the job and you can do the job well, that's number one. And number two can be pretty distant. People are critical of our county administrator, Randy Oliver, for living in Escambia County but working here. If he's not here, he doesn't care. All right. He's really good at his job, though. But in Crystal River, we get that unique blend. We get Commissioner Jeff Carnahan, who both clearly cares and is incredibly capable. Mayor Joe Meek, the exact same way. And that, combined with the community participation that was going on now, I hope we don't overlook Copeland Park areas of the city. I hope we don't overlook north of the city residential areas outside of the mall. I hope we look at including my neighborhood, which is directly south of the city, into the city sometime in the next 50 years. But all these three hopes are most likely going to become realities just based on that unique combination of capability of doing the job while also caring about the results of that job and the area they represent as well. So, extremely excited to see what comes of this over this week. Getting to topic 2, but first, this show brought to you today by Vellum. As events are returning, make sure yours stands out with professional marketing for your big day. Vellum, the difference is in the design. Learn more at TampaBayVellum.com. That's TampaBayVellum.com. All right, let's get to this. When people talk to me about my other job, campaign manager. When I'm out on the campaign trail making small talk, I get asked all the time, what is your biggest fear? Because I believe in everyone who I work with, and they truly think they could make the world we live in a better place, I always respond with this. I'm scared I'm going to do a good thing badly. I'm scared I'm going to do a good thing badly. Helping a good person get elected is a service, and I'm terrified it won't turn out that way because of me. So I just got back from Manatee County. It's where my parents live. I've never been one of these people to call Citrus County Circus County because everywhere has its problems, and they usually look the same or worse. I remember back in 2018, I was running a circuit judge race that was 5 counties, and we'd go to these events in Lake County, and they wouldn't have any idea how to pay for school safety officers. It was the exact same stuff we were talking about in Citrus, still in the wake of the Parkland shooting. And so we have our problems here and there, but by and large, we do a pretty good job here. Manatee County over the last year, Manatee County has been an example of what not to do. They have fired their county administrator. They've paid out in a lawsuit to settle a claim over their commissioners violating sunshine laws. And all of this has still just happened in 2021. But in the news this week down there, it's all been about an animal shelter. Now, to give you some background on this, Manatee County is 3 counties to our south. It goes Hernando, Pasco, Hillsborough, then Manatee, roughly 2 hours away. It has a population of just over 400,000 people and growing rapidly thanks to Lakewood Ranch, a development that rivals the Villages in its expansion. In Citrus, we're still at about 150,000 residents, so they are slightly more than twice our population. In 2016, Manatee County passed a single-cent sales tax increase for infrastructure, something that has been talked about here and a measure that I oppose, but many on the commission, most vocally Commissioner Ruthie Schleybaugh, support. Before the 2020 election cycle, their county commission voted to designate land for a new animal shelter on the east side of the county to supplement an existing shelter on the west side. The new shelter was going to cost the county $8 million, which would be funded through the infrastructure tax, and a nonprofit agreed to fundraise an additional $2 million, bringing the total cost of their animal shelter to $10 million. Let's take a moment to compare this. As you may know, our commission voted for a shelter to be between $8 and $9 million, and has since admitted it will be the full $9 million. The original motion was to use existing fundraising efforts to pay down the cost to the county for only $7.5 million. We had raised about $1.5 million privately. But instead, everything points to the fact that they're going to change this and put all the private fundraising into a supplemental fund and still use $9 million of taxpayer funds. Diverting this $1.5 million back to a supplemental fund, combining with fundraising efforts that have been done since then, puts the total cost of our project at roughly $11 to $11.5 million. A couple of things on this. The County Commission and the Chronicle repeatedly told the public when selling this project that it would never build a shelter that cost $11 million. Here's my evidence. Chronicle editorial on April 30th, quote, "It doesn't have to be an $11 million palace," end quote. Here's an article from April 11th about the board considering the vote. Quote, "The estimated price tag is $11.5 million. Commissioner Jeff Kennard said that the price would likely, at that price, it would likely be, quote, dead on arrival, end quote. Kennard said he wonders if the Bacon Group people even considered the county's needs for a simple, practical shelter, not a Taj Mahal, end quote. Yet, here we are, staring down an $11 to an $11.5 million project that we didn't need. We could go with something simpler, not something that will cost what a county over twice our size has proposed to build. So you may be asking now, how did we get here? And why, Bobby, are you the only one saying anything? Aren't there enough red flags as to where this project is headed to step back and reevaluate it? Yeah, there are. But they're choosing to ignore them, and to understand why, you have to go back to Manatee County. A private shelter operated by a nonprofit gifted Manatee County at the beginning of this year their shelter that they operated. And so even though this shelter was on the west side of their county, near where their existing shelter was located, the county commission felt that building an additional brand new facility on top of receiving this gift of a new shelter would be redundant. So they pulled the plug on the east side shelter last week. After all, 3 of their 7 county commissioners, a near majority, had just been elected in 2020 and had not been part of the vote to designate the land or to plan the new shelter. And that's why the rush is on here. Things change, whether it's public opinion or the makeup of the commission itself or any number of things. These projects can turn instantly. And so this commission is forging ahead with this project regardless of the cost to get it done. The problem with this is there are a lot of differences between what happened in Manatee County and what is happening in Citrus, which means we don't have to panic. For example, what killed their project, in addition to the donation, was that 3 members who all opposed the shelter took office in 2020. The only 2 commissioners who are up for re-election in 2022 here are those who already voted against this proposal. And I want to be clear on this too. They didn't oppose the new shelter necessarily. They just felt that costs were going to get out of control because they also happened to be the 2 most senior members of the commission. So they knew that there was a high chance of that happening. And it turns out it's exactly what happened. So my message to the commission is this. Stop trying to rush this. Manatee County is proof that projects like this can get derailed, but our circumstances are wildly different. Don't do a good thing badly. We're making real progress, but don't let fear of failure lead you to delivering a poorly planned, overpriced product. Don't do a good thing badly. If you want to join this conversation, find us on social, on the Concurrent Facebook, Twitter, or go to the Concurrent website and post on our discussion boards. Today's episode was sponsored by Vellum. For all your traditional and digital marketing needs, turn to Vellum at tampabayvellum.com. This is the Bobby Winsler Show, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Concurrent website, and mobile app. See you next week.